I don't know if I will be coherent in what I will say, because I'm trying to wrap up from everything that has been said during the last days, especially in the roundtables. So I took a picture of Quebec here. This is what I have chosen. A picture with a balloon. For my anniversary, my spouse offered me this trip over the city of Quebec on a balloon here. But also maybe to learn when we try to fly up a little bit and see where we're going. It's good to step up and look from away. I'll take a few historical elements and then see what would be the main lessons from this history to come to what I call interculture action, a new term I'm using here. Looking into history is looking what we have learned from history, but also the circle and limitations we gave ourselves in history to get out of this framework. What we learned, and many presenters talked about it during these 3 days. For a long time, society was about men. Daniel used the word an androcentric society. So the reference in the society is men. And with the whole feminist movement, we learned how to see the other ways of doing and imagining the world. And we have to take into account the genders. De Beauvoir has said, we don't born a woman, we become a woman. So I use the same expression, we're not born a man, we become a man. We have to learn along life about the behaviors and constraints. So the first important step is to remind ourselves of this. Very quickly, during the movements and pressures, Jocelyn talked about the years 1970s brought us to reflect on the feminist movement. Men started to stand up and say, how can we support women? Mrs. Lefourchère, she's in the room here. One of the first documents I had the chance to read is the Fabrication of Men, Fabrication des Mâles in French, is what we call traditional masculinity or hegemonic masculinity, which is another expression, or dominating masculinity, in link with a criticism of patriarchism. Men were supporting this movement. So we started to see that patriarchy was starting to represent a straitjacket for men as well. So at the time, we wanted to see not anymore looking from what women had done and their reflection and the women's perspective, but what was our perspective, our point of view, our experiences, our reality, how we saw these limitations. So going from a system focused on the support to women to a system that looked like us. I put up the picture of Joseph Pleck, many of you know, with the myth of masculinity, which is a key document to help us and understand the straitjacket. The Real Boys, this is the book here. Another important element to see a little bit more. James, I don't know if James O'Neill is here, worked a lot from this vision of influences it can have masculine biology. I will surprise two person here. We developed our life as men from key elements, significant events in my life. Two women I want to recognize, especially here, my spouse, who is an organizer. Also, she gave a lot of time for this organization. Also a feminist who who questioned herself and helped me to question myself and supported this common reflection we have to do, men and women. I'm very proud to be beside her. There are important periods in our life, periods that help us to change and reflect. The fact of being a father was very significant in my life. Someone who's counting very much in my life, my daughter, she's here today. She's also a social worker, and she thought about masculinity in a perspective of family, the perspective where we have to take into account other events, other people, many other people who were important. We can say, many other people in our life are significant. Many mentors around who are ordinary people we learn a lot from. So it's important to think about that. The other historical text, I put up the picture of Connell. We talked about Connell talking about masculinity as being a configuration of practices depending on time, space, and situation. So masculinity can change according to the various environments. The most important lesson from Connell theory, it's not something that is set in time, but it evolves, it changes, and is different from one reality to the other. Fortunately, a bit too limited in these four types, but I will come back later on this. However, and I'll look up my notes. The advantage of Connell theory is that it's a complex theory, of course, and it is interesting because it's about the multiplicity of masculinity and break down the myth that all men are alike. No, not all men are alike. Every man is unique, like every woman is unique. We talk about hegemonic masculinity, diverse masculinity, and the reference with Connell is the hegemonic masculinity is associated to traditional masculinity. It's similar to the concept of Plex concept of masculinity, and saying that men do not express emotions as much, and they don't want to ask for help. So there's all sorts of characteristics, negative characteristics. We put all men in that category, and others criticize that theory. John was one who presented that, and others we call positive psychology of men, and Seneca wrote interesting things in that field. This vision, unfortunately, will bring us the stereotype images of men when we criticize these models. At the same time, we have limited visions of our understanding of man without seeing strengths and contributions of man. We have examples with our colleagues from southern countries with a collectivist vision, and we also see better the place men can have and what type of environment they're given, what possibility we give them to be able to develop differently. The period we are in is to ask the question, what should be defined and what do we have to define? So what can we remember of what was done in the past? First thing is the support and complementarity with women's studies and movements. Examples we have just seen from the southern country, very revealing. This is an image in Cambodia. And so the network of men and women work together. When men meet, there's always a few women there to take notes, not just to remember what men have said, but to bring that back to their women's group and the other way around. When women meet, men go and see and what is going on and bring back the reflection of women. Very interesting, this approach. Maybe we can take lessons here in the North. Unfortunately, we are opposing. So this has important consequences. First, there are groups in Quebec, in the U.S., in France, Belgium, Switzerland, Australia, minority groups, we have to say, for various reasons have developed an aggressive and anti-feminist approach. Very often, they contest or oppose the progressive work done by some men. Also, there are people working in reaction to what we are doing. Radical feminists in their position very often, along with groups of the years 1970, place men as enemies, and these pressure groups present in developing countries, mainly in France and Canada, and oppose any considerations of men's group and boys' groups. We have echoes here after the Rondeau report. Reaction of 17 groups was denied, unfortunately. And also we had echoes in the last report of the women's status group, doubting the idea of men's group, and they were based only on reflections, not on data. Editorial reflections.